The look on my husband's face when he opened the door of his five-star hotel suite and saw me standing there with his boss, the CEO of his company, right beside me, that was the moment he finally understood that his carefully constructed 20-year-long lie was over. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Alice. My name is Alice Gable. I am 78 years old, and for the past 2 years, my home has been here, in a small, quiet apartment in the city. Though for 50 years before that, my life, my home, my entire world, was a beautiful, rambling old house in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. This story, my goodness, this is a story I have held in my heart like a secret, poison jewel. It is the story of a 52-year marriage, a 20-year affair, and a single, explosive, and I must confess, deeply, deeply satisfying elevator ride. My own children, my dear, beloved children, know that their father and I are divorced. They know he lost his job in a terrible scandal. They think it was all a tragic, unforeseen event. They do not know that their quiet, dependable, and long-suffering mother was the one who quietly, methodically, and with a precision that would have made a general proud, orchestrated the entire beautiful and catastrophic implosion of their father's life. There is a particular kind of shame, you see, that is reserved for the wronged wife. The wife who didn't know. You become an object of pity. Your friends look at you with a terrible sympathetic kindness. And in that pity, you begin to question everything. You question your own intelligence, your own intuition, your own worth. His betrayal becomes the central story of your life, and your own, long and faithful story becomes nothing more than the sad, quiet prelude to it. But I am telling this story now because I am done with being a prelude. I am done with the shame. I have learned that the only thing more powerful than a charming man's lie is a quiet woman's truth. And I am telling it for any woman or any man who has ever been made to feel like the silent, unsuspecting fool in the grand, dramatic production of someone else's life. Before I begin this difficult, and I must admit, rather triumphant story, I would be so very grateful for your support. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your kindness, your presence, it is a great comfort. It gives this old woman the strength to finally step back into that hotel hallway of my memory and tell you the story of the night she finally, and with the most profound and satisfying finality, knocked on the door. Thank you, my dears. Thank you for that. My story, our story, began not with a lie, but with a promise. We met in college. I was a quiet, serious girl studying to be a teacher, a girl from a simple working-class family with a belief in hard work and a steady heart. He, my George, was a force of nature. A boy on a football scholarship from a similar background, with a brilliant, 100-watt smile, and a hunger to conquer the world that was as dazzling as it was irresistible. He was not just ambitious for himself. He was ambitious for us. Our love story was a story of shared dreams, of a partnership built on a foundation of mutual, and I must admit, a rather ruthless desire to build a better life than the ones we had come from. He was the brilliant, charming visionary, and I was the quiet, methodical, and deeply practical strategist. He was the beautiful, soaring rocket, and I was the invisible, and absolutely essential, launch pad. I remember the night he was offered his first real job. It was a sales position at a big, important manufacturing company, Sterling Corp. It was a huge opportunity, but it was a commission-only job. A terrifying risk for a young couple with a new baby and a mountain of student debt. I will never forget the look of fear and of hope in his eyes. "It's a gamble, Alice," he'd said, his voice a low, anxious murmur. "We could lose everything." I didn't say a word. I just poured him a cup of coffee, and I went to work. I sat at that kitchen table all night, with my ledger book, my pencil, and my quiet, steady determination. I made a budget. A brutal, shoestring, and almost impossible budget. I calculated our odds. I analyzed the risk. I solved the equation. When he woke up, I slid a piece of paper across the table to him. It was a plan. A plan for how we could survive for 6 months on my teacher's salary alone. A plan for our victory. He had looked at me, his eyes full of a relief and a gratitude so profound it was almost worship. He took my hands that were smudged with pencil lead, and he held them to his lips. "You are my secret weapon, Alice Gable," he'd whispered. "The whole world will see me, the brilliant salesman. But you are the reason I can fly. You are the foundation that no one sees. And without you, I am nothing." No. Yeah. In that moment, I had never felt so seen, so loved, so essential. We built our life on that foundation. He was, as I knew he would be, a brilliant salesman. He rose through the ranks at Sterling Corp with a speed that was breathtaking. He was a star. And I was the silent partner, the one who managed the home, who raised our 2 beautiful children, Michael and Sarah, who managed our finances with a quiet, meticulous precision. I was the one who created the perfect, calm, and stable world that allowed him to go out and be the brilliant, conquering hero of his own story. And for 25 years, it was a beautiful life. It was a true and equal partnership. We bought our beautiful home in the suburbs. We sent our children to the best schools. We were a success story, a testament to the American dream. He was the brilliant, public face of our success. I was the quiet, private, and utterly indispensable foundation upon which it was all built. The change, when it came, was not a sudden, violent storm. It was a slow, almost imperceptible poisoning. It began when he was promoted to vice president of sales. It began when his world, which had once been our world, became his world. A world of business-class flights and 5-star hotels and long, important business trips to cities I had never seen. He never stopped loving me, but he stopped seeing me. He began to see me not as his partner, but as a part of the beautiful domestic scenery of the life he came home to. The quiet, reliable, and in his mind, increasingly boring and predictable wife who managed the home front, while he, the hero, was out slaying dragons in the glamorous, exciting world of international business. The 30 years that followed were a masterclass in the art of the perfect and completely fraudulent marriage. From the outside, our life was a portrait of perfect, enviable success. George Gable was a titan of industry, the senior vice president of global sales for Sterling Corp. D&D. Our home was a beautiful, sprawling testament to his success. Our children were bright and beautiful and went to the best universities. And I was the perfect, elegant, and utterly supportive corporate wife. The quiet, graceful woman who stood beside her great man at the annual awards dinners, smiling her serene and increasingly practiced smile. My role, once so central to our shared dream, had been slowly, gently, and with the utmost loving respect, made obsolete. My mind for numbers, my strategic thinking, my role as his secret weapon, it was no longer needed. He had a team of brilliant young MBS for that now. My new role was to be the curator of our beautiful, perfect, and increasingly empty home. I was the CEO of a domestic life he was rarely a part of. And then, about 20 years ago, his business trips became more frequent and more urgent. There was always a new crisis, a new deal to be closed, in a new and exciting city. A 3-day trip to Chicago would become a week. A week in London would stretch into 2. He was always so apologetic, his voice on the phone a symphony of deep, sincere-sounding regret. "Alice, my love," he would say, his voice crackling over a long-distance line. "I am so sorry, but this deal, it's a monster. I'm chained to this conference room. I miss you. I love you." And I, the good, trusting, and supportive wife, would say, "I miss you too, my darling. You just do what you have to do. We are all so proud of you." I was so proud of him. And I was such a fool. The woman, her name, I would later learn, was Marianne. She was a high-end travel agent, the one his company used to book their executive travel. She was a widow, a few years younger than me, a beautiful, sophisticated woman who lived in a chic, elegant apartment in New York City. She was, in every way, my opposite. She was not a homebody. She was a citizen of the world. A woman who lived in the same glamorous, exciting world of five-star hotels and international flights that my husband now called his own. He did not have an affair to replace me. He had an affair to replicate me. He had, with a terrible, and I must admit, a brilliant and ruthless efficiency, created a second, secret, and far more exciting life for himself. He had his quiet, comfortable, suburban life with me, his domestic, supportive, and predictable wife, and he had his glamorous, exciting, international life with her, his sophisticated, worldly, and exciting mistress. He had his cake, and he was eating it too, in the first-class lounge at JFK. The moment of discovery, the moment the beautiful, 52-year-long facade of my life shattered into a million irreparable pieces, was not a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet, accidental, and utterly, soul-crushingly mundane discovery. It was about 3 years ago. I was doing a bit of spring cleaning, a task I had always found deeply satisfying. I was in his closet, a vast walk-in space that was more like a gentleman's boutique than a closet. In the very back, on a high shelf, covered in dust, was an old leather briefcase he hadn't used in years. I took it down, intending to donate it to charity. The latches were stiff. I opened it, and inside was not a collection of old papers. Inside was his other life. It was all there. 20 years of it. A thick, neat, and meticulously organized file of receipts, of ticket stubs, of hotel bills. My husband, the brilliant, organized executive, had been just as meticulous in the management of his secret life as he was in the management of his public one. I sat on the floor of that silent, beautiful closet, and I read the story of my own betrayal. And with every page, the man I had loved for 52 years, the man I had built a life with, the man who was the father of my children, dissolved into a stranger. A cruel, selfish, and profoundly deceitful stranger who had been living a lie, a grand, beautiful, and very expensive lie, right under my nose for 2 decades. The pain, oh my goodness, the pain was a physical thing. It was a cold, heavy stone in my chest that made it impossible to breathe. It was not just the betrayal of his body. It was the betrayal of our history. He had not just shared his bed with her, he had shared our life. He had taken her to our favorite restaurant in Paris, the one where we had celebrated our 20th anniversary. He had bought her a Cartier watch, almost identical to the one he had given me for my 50th birthday. He had been systematically, and with a terrible romantic cruelty, recreating the milestones of our life, with her as the star. And the hotels, my God, the hotels. The bills were all there. The 5-star suites, the room service charges for 2, the champagne, and the plane tickets. A second, corresponding ticket for every single one of his lonely business trips for the past 20 years. A second ticket for Mrs. M. Gable, his mistress, traveling under my own, stolen name. He was not just a cheat. He was a thief. He had been stealing my name, my memories, my very life, and he had been using them to decorate his sordid little affair. I sat in that silent closet until the sun went down, and in the darkness, the grief, the heartbreak, the shame, it all began to recede, and in its place, something else began to grow. A cold, quiet, and formidable anger. The anger of a queen who has just discovered a traitor in her court, a traitor who has not just stolen from the treasury, but who has tried to steal the very soul of the kingdom. I did not confront him. What would have been the point? He was a master of the lie. He would have charmed his way out of it, as he always had. He would have told me I was crazy, that I was misinterpreting things. He would have made it my fault. No, Ashamu. Confrontation was a game for amateurs. I was the woman who had written his first business plan. I was the woman who had taught him how to read a balance sheet. I understood the language of strategy. and I understood the quiet, brutal, and beautiful logic of a perfectly executed and long overdue revenge. He had been living a secret life for 20 years. Fine. I would begin to live my own. My war began that very morning. It was a war of paper, of patience, of quiet, meticulous, and legal preparation. While he was at the office, I was on the phone. I did not call a divorce lawyer. I called the best and most ruthless private investigator in the state of Ohio. I did not tell him about the affair. I did not tell him about the briefcase. I told him only one thing. I believe my husband, George Gable, a senior executive at Sterling Corp., may be misusing company funds, I said, my voice as calm and as cold as the grave. I would like you to follow him on his next business trip. I want a complete and very, very detailed record of his activities. I want to know where he goes, who he sees, and what exactly he is doing. I knew, from the company calendar that his secretary so helpfully sent me each month, that his next big trip was in 2 weeks. He was going to the annual Global Sales Conference. It was a 4-day event held that year at a magnificent 5-star luxury resort in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was the company's most important event of the year. And his boss, the new, young, and notoriously moral CEO of Sterling Corp., a man named Mr. Harrison, would be there. The stage was set. The players were in place. And I, the quiet, boring, and long-suffering wife, was about to become the director of a brand new and very, very explosive little play. I just had to be patient. I had to wait for my moment. And I knew, with the certainty of a woman who had nothing left to lose, that he, in his arrogance, would give it to me. The 2 weeks leading up to the Scottsdale conference were the longest and the strangest of my life. I was a spy in my own home. I played the part of the devoted, slightly lonely wife with a flawless, and I must admit, a deeply satisfying precision. I helped my husband pack his suitcase. I made sure his favorite ties were cleaned. I listened, with a serene smile on my face, as he told me how much he would miss me, how he wished I could come with him. "It's all business, my love," he'd said, kissing my forehead. "Boring meetings from dawn till dusk. You would be miserable." "I know, my darling," I had said, patting his cheek. "You just work hard and come home safe." He left on a Tuesday morning. And I, his quiet, domestic, and utterly predictable wife, left on a Tuesday afternoon. I did not fly first class. I flew coach. I did not stay at the magnificent 5-star resort where the conference was being held. I stayed at a small, clean, and completely anonymous business hotel a few miles down the road. And I waited. My private investigator, a quiet, efficient man named Mr. Peters, was a genius. He was a ghost. He had a team, and they were everywhere. They were the bellhops, the waiters, the cleaning staff. They were invisible, and they missed nothing. The reports came in every evening, in a plain manila envelope slipped under my hotel room door. And they were a masterpiece of quiet, damning detail. They confirmed that my husband, Mr. George Gable, had checked into a single room, a lavish corner suite on the top floor, and that his colleague, Mrs. Marianne Gable, who had checked in under my own, stolen name, was in the adjoining suite. They confirmed that the connecting door between the two suites was unlocked, and that they were, for all intents and purposes, sharing a single, magnificent, and very expensive home away from home. They documented the gifts. A $2,000 handbag from the hotel's luxury boutique. A $5,000 pair of diamond earrings from a local jeweler. All paid for with the Sterling Corp company credit card. They documented the lies. The boring dawn till dusk meetings were in fact long, leisurely rounds of golf. The endless, stuffy conference dinners were intimate, romantic meals for two at the city's most expensive restaurants. It was all there. The whole, sordid, and breathtakingly arrogant tapestry of his betrayal, laid out in a series of glossy 8-tin photographs and neatly typed expense reports. I had my arsenal. The final and most crucial piece of the puzzle, however, was his boss, Mr. Harrison. I knew, from my years as a corporate wife, that he was a man of a different generation. A man of quiet, ruthless, and deeply old-fashioned integrity. He was a devout family man, a man who had built his own career on a foundation of loyalty and hard work. He had a deep and abiding contempt for the kind of lazy, arrogant, and entitled executive that my husband had become. He was, I knew, my final and most powerful court of appeal. The moment came on the third night of the conference. It was the night of the grand, formal awards dinner, the culmination of the entire event. I waited until I knew from Mr. Peters' report that the dinner was over. I waited until I knew that my husband and his mistress had retired to their lavish top-floor suite for the night. And then I made my move. I took a taxi to the resort. I walked through that grand, glittering lobby, and I did not feel like an intruder. I felt like an owner, a woman who had, through her 52 years of silent, unpaid partnership, paid for every single glittering chandelier in the place. I took the elevator to the top floor. Mr. Harrison's suite, as the CEO, was at the end of the hall. I knocked on his door. He opened it himself. He was in a dressing gown, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked at me, and his eyes, his sharp, intelligent eyes, widened with a look of pure, uncomprehending shock. "Alice," he said, his voice a stunned whisper. "My God, what on earth are you doing here? Is something wrong? Is it George?" "Yes, Mr. Harrison," I said, and my voice was calm and quiet and full of a terrible, sad, and absolute finality. "It is George, and I am afraid something is very, very wrong." I did not tell him a long, emotional story. I did not weep. I did not make accusations. I simply handed him the plain, manila envelope my investigator had prepared. He read every word. He looked at every photograph. He looked at the credit card statements, the ones that so clearly, so beautifully, and so damningly detailed the theft not just from me, but from his own company. When he was finished, he looked up at me, and in his eyes I did not see pity. I saw a shared and profound and deeply satisfying rage. "That man," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, "is a disgrace to my company, to his family, and to himself." He stood up. "Where is he, Alice?" "Down the hall?" I said. "Suite 1200. He walked to the door of his suite. He did not put on a suit. He went in his dressing gown. He was no longer a CEO dealing with a subordinate. He was a man of honor, about to deal with a man who had none. And I, his quiet, respectable, and long-suffering wife, I walked with him. We stood outside the door of suite 1200. I could hear the faint sound of music from within and the low murmur of their voices. I could hear her laugh, a happy, carefree, and deeply intimate sound. Mr. Harrison looked at me. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. And then I raised my hand, and with a knuckle that did not tremble, I knocked on the door of my husband's secret life. The game was over. The trap was sprung. And it was time, finally, for the king to see that his entire, beautiful, and fraudulent kingdom was about to be reduced to a pile of ashes. The seconds between my knock and the door opening felt like a lifetime. I could hear the music inside stop abruptly. I could hear a hushed, questioning murmur. And then the door swung open. My husband, my George, stood there. He was not wearing a suit. He was in a plush, white hotel bathrobe, a glass of champagne in his hand. His hair was slightly disheveled. He was smiling a relaxed, happy, and deeply intimate smile. And then he saw me. He just stood there, his mouth slightly open, the champagne glass frozen in his hand. And from behind him, a woman's voice, a voice I knew from 1,000 polite, professional, and utterly fraudulent phone calls, called out, a melody of happy, carefree intimacy. "Who is it, darling?" And then she appeared behind him. His mistress, Marianne Taido. She was also in a white hotel bathrobe. Her hair was down. She was beautiful and relaxed and happy. And then she saw me. And she saw Mr. Harrison. and the beautiful, happy, and carefree look on her face. It shattered. The silence in that doorway was the most profound, most absolute, and most satisfying silence I have ever known. It was the sound of a 20-year-long lie dying a sudden, violent, and very public death. Mr. Harrison was the one who finally broke it. He did not shout. He did not rage. His voice was a low, quiet, and utterly contemptuous rumble. "George," he said, his eyes boring into my husband's, "you have 5 minutes to pack a bag. You are to leave this hotel immediately. You will be on the first flight back to Cleveland in the morning. Your career at Sterling Corp is over. You are a disgrace to this company and to me. We are done. We are done." And then he looked at Marianne. His gaze was even colder, if that was possible. "And you, madam," he said, "you will be hearing from our legal department. I would advise you to hire a very, very good lawyer." "Non." He did not wait for an answer. He simply turned and walked, with the quiet, righteous fury of a betrayed king, back down the hall to his own suite. And then it was just the three of us. Me and my husband and his mistress. George just stood there, a broken, hollowed-out shell of the great man he had pretended to be. And Marianne, she looked at me, and in her beautiful, terrified eyes, I did not see remorse. I did not see shame. I saw only the raw, naked hatred of a woman who has just had her entire, beautiful, and carefully constructed world burned to the ground. I did not say a word. I did not need to. I simply met her gaze, and in my own quiet, calm, and utterly victorious eyes, she saw her own ruin. And then I turned, and I walked away. I left them there, in the ruins of their sordid, little, 20-year-long lie. And I did not look back. I filed for divorce the very next day. He did not contest it. He had no fight left in him. The public humiliation, the loss of his job, the utter and complete destruction of his own heroic myth, it had broken him. The divorce was quiet, and it was absolute. I did not take half of our assets. I took everything. My lawyers, armed with the mountain of evidence from my investigator, proved, with a beautiful and brutal precision, that his 20 years of fraud and embezzlement had more than equaled his own share of our marital assets. He was left with his pension and the clothes on his back. He was left with nothing but the consequences of his own choices. He moved to a small rented condo in Florida, a place where no one knew his name, a king in a kingdom of one. My children, my goodness, the truth was a terrible, bitter, and necessary medicine for them to swallow. The image of their father, their great, heroic, and larger-than-life father, was shattered forever. But they are good children. They are strong. And in the ashes of that old fraudulent story, we are, for the first time, building a new one. A family based not on a beautiful romantic myth, but on a difficult and complicated, and ultimately, a more honest truth. I learned the hardest lesson a woman can learn, that a lie, no matter how beautiful, is a cage, and that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that can ever truly set you free. My husband did not just cheat on me. He erased me. He made me a ghost in my own life, a quiet, domestic, and utterly predictable footnote to his own grand story. And my final act, my quiet, patient, and beautifully executed trip to Scottsdale. It was not an act of revenge. It was a resurrection. The resurrection of the woman I had been, the woman I had forgotten, the woman who was anything but a fool. So, if you are out there, and you are living in the shadow of someone else's grand story, please, remember this old woman. You are not a footnote. You are a story of your own. And your truth is the most powerful, most valuable, and most beautiful thing you will ever own. Do not be afraid to use it. And do not be afraid to book a plane ticket. You never know what you might find at the end of the journey. Thank you for letting me share this very eventful story with you. It is a good reminder, I think, that it is never too late to become the hero of your own story. If you have found strength in this tale, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and press that little notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. And in the comments below, I would love for you to share a story about a time when a quiet truth turned out to be the most powerful weapon of all. Love you all. This is Grandma Alice, and I'll see you in the next story.